In the previous episode, we came to understand that the books of the Bible are not scientific or historical documents, but rather the faith expression of the believing community. Having said that, we also acknowledge that the social, political, economic, and religious atmosphere influences the writings of the author, and therefore it becomes important to know the history of the people and the place as well. In this episode, we shall look at some of the important events in the history of the people of Israel to help us better understand the books of the Bible. So let's begin. In this video, I will be using the chronology as mentioned in the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic Edition. All the events in the Bible prior to 1000 BC are approximations due to scarcity of evidence concerning the time of the early events, and dates for prehistoric events like creation, the flood, the Tower of Babel are unknown. To better understand the vast duration of time covered in the Bible, I have divided the biblical history into 5 major parts. The first part of biblical history stretches from the time of Abraham to the entry of the people of Israel into the Promised Land. We begin with Abraham settling in the land of Canaan in circa 2200 BC. The next important event is Jacob and his family moving to Egypt to live with Joseph as their land was hit by famine in circa 1876 BC. The Israelites then grew in number in Egypt until the oppression began under Pharaoh, which led to the landmark event of the Exodus under the leadership of Moses in circa 1446 BC. The Exodus is the long period of 40 years during which the Israelites had to wander in the wilderness as they did not have faith in Yahweh. The Exodus ended with the successful entry into the Promised Land under the leadership of Joshua in circa 1406 BC. The second part of biblical history stretches from the rule of the judges to the division of the United Kingdom. Before Israel had a king, it had a series of 12 leaders called judges, starting from circa 1380 BC. The judges were not only skillful administrators but also successful military commanders. God raised them to deliver Israel from its enemies and lead them back to Him. But every time a judge died, Israel went astray again, returning to the sinful practices and idolatry. Eventually, the Israelites demand a king, and Saul is anointed as their king in circa 1043 BC. Later, under the rule of King David, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah were united, only to be divided again after the death of Solomon in circa 931 BC. After the decline of the United Kingdom of Israel, Hebrew tradition describes the significance of great prophets or teachers who spoke on behalf of God and set moral and ethical standards for the whole community. Yahweh sent these prophets to warn the Israelites that they were not abiding by their covenant. Over the next couple of centuries, the two nations underwent political turmoil and kept going away from God till things reached rock bottom. The third part of biblical history covers the most important event in the history of the Israelites after Exodus, the Assyrian conquest of Israel and the Babylonian exile of Judah. In the 6th century BCE, Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III strengthened Assyria and established it as a great empire to be reckoned with. He also introduced a very interesting way of dealing with the conquered peoples. It's called exile. To pacify the lands they invaded, the Assyrians took the indigenous people, moved them someplace else, and brought others to take their place. In 723 BC, the Assyrians conquered and deported most of the northern kingdom of Israel to Assyria. Further, the Assyrians began to populate Israel with people from other nations they had defeated. The descendants of these foreigners and the remnant of Israel were later simply called Samaritans. During the time of Christ, the Samaritans were despised as an unclean people because of their mixed ancestry and rejection of temple-based worship. Not long after, Babylon, ruled by Nebuchadnezzar II, conquered the southern kingdom of Judah, destroyed the temple, and took many Israelites captive in 586 BC. This period is known as the Babylonian exile. The Bible portrays the internal cause of this captivity as the sins of Judah in failing to rid herself of idolatry and refusing to heed prophetic warnings not to rebel against Babylon. The Babylonian exile left many of the exiles deeply repentant and determined to keep their faith pure. The fortunes of the Israelites changed when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and allowed the exiles to return in 538 BC. They soon began building the new temple and completed it in 516 BC. The fourth part of biblical history covers the period of a few centuries before the birth of Jesus. During this period, we see a lot of changes happening on the political front. First, in 333 BC, Alexander the Great defeated the Persian Empire and set out to conquer the world. After his sudden death in 323 BC, the Greek Empire was divided. As we have seen in the second episode on the biblical canon, it is during this period we have the Septuagint, that is the Greek translation of the Hebrew. After the Greeks, the Ptolemaics and the Seleucids began their rule. When the Jews were prohibited from practicing Judaism and their temple was desecrated by the Seleucid king Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the Jews revolted. First, led by Mattathias of the priestly Hasmonean family, and then by his son Judah the Maccabee. The Jews subsequently entered Jerusalem and purified the temple. Fighting against the Seleucids continued, but eventually the Maccabees gained complete control of the region and established an independent Jewish kingdom that would continue until the Romans conquered the region in 63 BC. The last part of biblical history deals with the period during the birth of Jesus. Herod the Great, the Roman vassal king, began his rule over the land of Israel in 37 BC, and the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem took place in circa 7 BC. The New Testament gives us the details of this period, which includes the public ministry of Jesus, his passion, death and resurrection, the missionary journeys of Paul, and the beginning of the early church. Historically, the landmark event in this part is the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. With the destruction of Jerusalem, there began a dispersion of the Jewish population and a persecution of the Christians, which continued till Emperor Constantine recognized Christianity in 313 AD. We have thus looked at the important events in biblical history. Having this in mind, we are now in a better position to look at when the different books of the Bible were written and by whom. Do write in with your comments about what you found interesting in this video. We'll meet again for the next episode of the Bible Explained. God bless.